Hey folks, this is The Debrief presented by Bright Hire, the series that you're turned into as Masters of Sales Hiring, featuring top sales leaders sharing lessons learned from building world-class sales teams. I'm your host, Teddy Chestnut, co-founder of Bright Hire, and I am joined today by not one but two amazing leaders from Attentive, CRO Brian Malkerson and VP of Recruiting Nasa Riley. Brian, Nasa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
good to be here.
Excited. Y'all been on the Bright Hire journey with us for a long time, and I'm excited to hear about that. But first, I want to hear about the journey that you've been on with Attentive. The last few years have been pretty crazy. Like, company became a unicorn, one of the fastest growing companies in North America, best startup for employer by Forbes. You've worked super closely together, building the go-to-market team during this time, and a lot of what we're going to talk about is like the partnership between your teams. But if you were to boil it down, it's like secret sauce of a successful partnership between the go-to-market and go-to-market recruiting teams. Nathan, maybe I can start with you. Like, how would you characterize like what's made for a really strong partnership so far?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of important things, right? Having alignment, clear two-way communication. Um, but I think that for me, the secret sauce would be the mutual respect between the sales team and the recruiting team, right? We're not order takers. I think the one thing that I really appreciate about the sales team is they truly understand that it takes both teams to be fully invested in the recruitment process to actually make it work, right? We get feedback to the hiring teams, they give feedback to us. Um, I think you would think of it this way. The hiring manager, the candidates are my customers. I need to understand what makes them tick, what they need, what they want, what value I can give to them. But at the same time, the hiring manager, Melky, is also my partner, right? We have to be in lockstep in the entire process to make sure that we close the candidate that we actually want to close, right? And so in some ways, sales and recruiting were kind of cut from the same cloth, right? Going through the similar motion, reaching out to prospects, booking that first discovery call, um, confirming next steps, moving the ball down the field, right? All the way to that rush that we get when the offer is actually signed. And so I think to some degree, I want to think we respect each other's game. That's like the best way I can put
Yeah.
it. Which is why it's very special working with the sales team, in my opinion.
Malcolm, what about you? What kind of investment have you asked your team to make in order to ensure that this partnership between sales and recruiting is really strong and you can both deliver together?
Yeah, Nasa's stealing all my sports analogies.
Sorry.
I'll throw a Hail Mary here. I think like a lot of, I think that trust and relationships goes back, right? Like a bunch of us had worked together, previous company at Twitter. And so, I think that mutual respect that NASA talks about, I think it's something that we know that is super important and we need to continuously earn. And I think NASA and her team make it super easy because, like she said, she treats candidates like they're customers, and they are, right? They are potentially future members and leaders on your team. Or if it doesn't have to be the right fit, they are potentially influencing other people that might join, or maybe, you end up working with them down the road. And so it's really important that they get a great experience. And I think Nasa and her team do a top-notch job of just always treating candidates with respect and staying on top of everything and making sure and trying to hold myself and the hiring managers accountable for doing that as well to create a really strong candidate experience. And then I think also just making sure that we get to good outcomes, right? Because I think with hiring any candidate, it's a two-way fit. And, at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're getting the right candidates who are coming in and joining for the right reasons and making sure we have a great opportunity to get in front of them with the right people to tell that story. And at the end of the day, I think Nathan and her team are just really invaluable in being able to unearth the important things that candidates are looking for and to make sure we're getting that good fit along with that process. And we've gone through different time periods, right? We went from 150 employees when COVID hit to 1,200, a year and a half later. And doing that all from going from a New York-based company to a remote-first company. And so doing all of that in a really, really kind of crazy time period. And I think, the last thing is they've just been super adaptable, not only just coming to us, the our department with solutions and ideas, but being always receptive to different ideas or things we want to try, because they obviously have a lot to do. And so sometimes, and I think they can be a good sounding board for like, hey, like, why don't we try, doing this? Or maybe if we change the process around a little bit this way, based on, maybe other things that we have going on. And they're always super receptive and a really strong sounding board and partner for that. So it's been very invaluable.
Just playing it back from how many to how many? Like 150 to 1,200 in a year and a half?
Yeah, I believe that was right. Or maybe it was like 160. But yeah, it was and that was in a variety of different areas. And a lot of those were, departments or sub-departments we didn't even have before during that time period. So it was a very challenging and Indian environment, let alone during a pandemic. So, and looking back on it, yeah, I couldn't imagine of doing it without, Nesa and her team.
Growing at that pace is incredibly challenging, even more so, as you alluded to, when you're hiring for a ton of roles that you haven't hired for before. If you're not aligned really tightly on the profile that you're looking for, I imagine at the outset, it can be really easy to spin your wheels and waste a lot of time. What were the most important things that your teams did together to make sure that there was really clear alignment on like what an ideal profile actually looked like for a given role? Nesa, like what role did your team play in kind of like shepherding that process or defining it or pushing back on it?
Yeah, I think at the very beginning, especially when it's a net new role, developing that job description is really important, right? I think it's amazing how when you put something pen to paper, it just makes things a lot more clear of what we actually want from this person, what this person's actually going to be doing. How does this tie into the actual goal of the team or the company? And also, it's in the voice of the hiring manager too oftentimes, so it can either attract or repel a candidate as well. And so I think it's a great exercise that we go through at the beginning. But the more important thing, in my opinion, since we've brought on BrightHire, is the ability to like continue to actually improve on the process and the candidate profile, right? And so having kickoff meetings, having weekly check-ins, having, over communicating with hiring managers are all great, but the recruiters are now being able to watch the interviews in real time, tweak, hey, the candidate that they thought was amazing actually was horrible when, come to it, right? Or perhaps just learning about the business itself and kind of candidates often ask a lot of great questions, but with recruiting, we're not actually in those positions, right? So we don't know sometimes what questions we should be asking. And so hearing what they ask and hearing how the interviewers actually answer them is really insightful. Like more importantly, or more recently, we just opened an enterprise AE role in the UK, and the recruiter actually listened to past interviews in preparation for that kickoff meeting with the hiring manager. So she got great historic context. She was able to ramp quicker in the role, and ultimately, hopefully, will close the role a lot faster. And so that efficiency is really important too.
Super helpful. Napi, how have you thought about driving alignment across your own team? Like going from 160 to 1,200, it's not just you're doing a ton of hiring. I'm sure you're involving a ton of new people in the hiring process, whether they're hiring managers or interviewers. And you've got to calibrate all those folks and make sure that they're keeping the bar high and they're all aligned. What was most challenging about that process, and what were some of the things you did tactically to try to keep the alignment tight?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenging elements. One, it's just time, particularly back during that scaling period. We had managers sometimes, or certain people spending 20, 30, 40% of their time doing interviews or recruiting, kind of that broader process. Well, at the same time, they have a ton of new people that they're trying to scale up and a lot of other things that they're trying to do. And so, that was one of the challenging elements. I think the other one that I alluded to earlier was that a lot of times there were first-time roles that we were carving out. And so trying to understand what is the right person. Do we want internally versus externally? Is it somebody who's done it before? Is it somebody who can kind of thrive in this type of environment, or a combination? Kind of hiring that athlete versus just pure on experience. So we like to have some kind of general guideposts we like to use or think about when hiring people and hiring particular roles. But you also want some level of flexibility because the company was going through these different stages so quickly and not every role is the same. And so we would try and spend some time at the beginning to, to go at your question from a tactical standpoint, is like, what is the right process we want here? And so I think of it as, what do we do to make sure we're, making offers to the right candidates? What do we do to make sure it's a great experience for the great candidates so we can get them in the door and get them all the way through and wanting to work here? And then how do we do it as kind of efficient as possible? And so I think as far as making sure we get the right candidates, it was a mix of making sure we brought in people that had done a lot of interviewing for certain roles. Like, let's say it's in the UK, and maybe, we had made a more recent hire on our sales leadership in the UK, and they just don't know about Attentive. And so making sure we have experienced sales managers from the US that are on that panel and can be involved in that process. And then when bringing in new people, which we obviously had to help scale up, making sure that we were mixing them with kind of other people who had more experience. We used a lot of data. We actually did, I worked with my go-to-market ops and analytics team, went back for the high volume roles we'd treat differently. So like, let's say an SDR, where we are making a high volume of hiring, or more junior sales roles. We would look at different scores that different managers gave them, and also see the managers of the different scores that managers gave. So we could then give feedback to try and drive better consistency or alignment around scores, but also say, hey, look, if a candidate got blank score very early in the process, let's change the process to make sure that it's a quicker process and get maybe more senior people in front of them. So it's maybe more of a situation we're trying to sell them versus just evaluate. So we made a bunch of those types of processes that we rolled out and tested in conjunction with the recruiting team and the ops team and the different hiring managers. And then, as Nesa mentioned, using tools like BrightHire, where one, it's a great from a training perspective, but also I could get feedback from people that even haven't interviewed people, because a lot of times they didn't have time with their schedule, or you'd have like fatigue on the interviewing perspective. And so we could have somebody else go in and watch different interviews and give feedback. And particularly if it's somebody within a certain department and they wanted to feel comfort level, but maybe we just didn't have room for them on the interview panel, that was really important. And then lastly, diving into different areas where, hey, somebody may have seen something somebody else didn't, and being able to flag that and have somebody kind of watch it in real time is super valuable. And to be honest, I think there's a lot more we can continue. I think we're still just scratching the surface with the ways that we can continue to build out our processes, and including using platforms like BrightHire.
Super helpful. So you both described kind of a period of massive hyper growth, right? Everybody's operating or not everybody, but almost everybody's operating in a different environment and context right now. What are the most important things that you're thinking about, Nesa, now, when you may have a little bit more breathing room to like rejigger the process, rethink about what went well and what you want to improve? What does that partnership look like now when you have a little bit more breathing room?
I think the two most important things for me is, one, timing, right? I think if we're able to kind of be a little more proactive and kind of getting as much of a heads up on what the hiring targets look like, the better. So we can be a little more strategic and more thoughtful in how we go about doing so. And I think the second piece is, because we do have some more time to be more intentional in the process itself, let's have a more consistent, structured interview process for every single position, just because if we can trust the process and we can kind of have the bandwidth and the capacity to deal with the nuances of what recruiting offers us, right? Because recruiting, at the end of the day, it's all about people, and people are unpredictable. We're dealing with their lives. We're dealing with one of the most important decisions that they're going to be making. So I think having as much time to kind of do the hiring that we need to do, as well as just having consistent, structured interview process, so we can kind of deal with other things as they come up.
Super helpful. Brian, anything else that you're focused on now that the volumes may not be as insane as they were the last couple of years prior?
Yeah, I think for us, we may not be hiring for some of the volume positions as much, but a lot of times there's still just new roles, or hiring for people, let's say, internationally, or as we look at new products and new verticals, where again, the hire maybe is slightly different. So it's just a different challenge. So we tend to spend more time on, like, you always want to make sure you're evaluating and getting great candidates. But I think also in a period where everyone else is hiring really quick, you have to move really fast. because everyone is kind of going through these very truncated or abbreviated cycles themselves, right? Where all these companies were trying to hire as quick as they could, and so they wanted to get people fast through the process, and so people didn't have a lot of time, and so I think we're trying to now adjust to kind of this period where we want to make sure we're thoughtful and we communicate well so people understand where they're in the process and what we're looking for and what they can do to next steps, and also give them more of an opportunity to get to know the company and to talk to people, because as I mentioned, it's really important that it's a when you interview, it is a two-way process. We want to find a great fit on both sides. Almost everyone we talk to is super talented and has been really successful and will be successful. We're just trying to figure out, are they going to be the most successful and be their best self here at Attentive, given our role and our company and what we're offering them. And so we're able to just spend, I think, a little bit more time on that element of it, which is great, right? Because, when you didn't really have as much time to get to know people, and I hired some people, I didn't even get to meet them in person for a year and a half because of the pandemic. And so usually it's always like, I thought you were taller or shorter. So, that's been a nice change as well. But yeah, we're constantly trying to slightly adapt and change as the environment and the technology changes.
Well, many of the teams, I'm sure, tuning into this are earlier in their journey of building a really strong partnership between the go-to-market recruiting team and the sales team. Nesa, if you were to think about like one thing to get right really early, right, as you're building that relationship, if you don't have all that history and shared trust, what's like one of the most important things that the recruiting team can be bringing to that partnership to ensure that trust gets built and you're off on the right foot?
I would say two things, if I can say two things versus one. One would be just making sure there's clear two-way communication, right? It shouldn't just be on the recruiting side, but on a softer note, there needs to be a lot more empathy that is given to the hiring managers and the hiring teams. I think, especially when you do have a lot to do, or maybe a smaller team, not as many resources, you're all moving very quickly, and hiring managers, interviewers, they have a lot of other things to focus on besides recruiting, right? And so giving them a little bit more grace, it's okay that something perhaps wasn't communicated because they forgot, especially again, being in a remote setting. I think to that would be, how quickly do you recover as a team, right? As a hiring manager, as a hiring team, as a recruiter. And that's all based on having a good relationship with the hiring manager. And so just remember to give each other empathy and just communicate more clearly next time around, right? And just keep moving forward.
Malky, what about from your side? Most important thing to do if you're a sales leader building a relationship with a new go-to-market recruiting leader early in that partnership?
I think with anything, it's getting alignment on kind of expectations, because everyone I think is a little bit different in how they communicate, or sometimes when ways they like to communicate, and kind of who kind of does what, or when you hand something off. Like I've been very lucky to have worked with someone, I'd say that both the tenure of the relationship with Nesa and also someone of her caliber, where if you're working with her or her team, you just kind of know if you make an intro, you don't have to worry about it. They're on top of it. They're going to make sure that the candidates come in, have a sense of the role and the company, and they know that they're going to be always keeping that candidate in mind and thinking about the experience that they're having. And so that's, I think super important. And, I think anytime you're working with somebody new, it's making sure that you kind of map out like you would for a customer on the sales side, as Nesa which said at the beginning, which I liked, which is, the candidate's their customer. So mapping out what does that customer experience look like. They're going to have a lot of different touch points with the company. So it might be the website or external sites. It's going to be everything from the form they fill out and where and how it's positioned, to back channels that they're going to do, to meeting with people formally as part of the process, to the recruiting team, etc. And so just making sure that that candidate has a great experience, and then kind of working your way backward and making sure there's good alignment there.
Brian, Nesa, CRO, head of go-to-market recruiting at Attentive, thank you so much for joining me today on Masters of Sales Hiring. Really appreciate your perspective, and you've clearly built an amazing partnership, which is a model for, I think, a lot of teams out there looking to build great sales teams.
Great. Thanks for having us, Teddy.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.